So excited to be joined today by Justin Dux, who is one of my students and has found success launching his career in the cloud. And so, Justin, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great.
Awesome. So I understand that you work for Be the Match, and can you tell me a little bit about your job as far as day in the life and what your title is there? And then we'll talk about how you ended up there.
Absolutely. I'm a Salesforce administrator, according to HR, but what really got me excited about the role was it was described as more of a declarative administrator. So they had a strong team already of a senior admin and then also 3 or 4 developers dedicated to Salesforce. A lot of those were legacy system people that are learning Salesforce development over the last year. And they recognized they had a need then to try to focus in and make sure we leveraged as many Salesforce features that were declarative in nature, clicks not code. And this would hopefully prevent us from introducing a ton of new technology debt through code bases and Apex coding and customizations that could have been done another way through declarative features.
So I understand that, and you've sent me your timeline as far as your journey into this job, and I'll share that in the link down below as well for others. And I think that's a Google Doc, if I remember correctly. I did read through that, but if you could tell or share a little bit more about what people can expect from reading about your journey, as far as what your timeline looked like and what some of the challenges you had to overcome in landing this Salesforce role.
Absolutely. So I was lucky enough to start my journey at a nonprofit. I was already working there in what I would describe as like a low-level donor database kind of role. Um, Probably 80% of my time was dedicated to getting mailings out to raise money. So not necessarily a Salesforce job. However, quickly in that new role, this was about 4 years ago now, in this timeline, I was given the opportunity to step up and learn some Salesforce because the admin of the company left, as well as somebody that was partnered with that person and working closely with them on all the CRM administration also left the company. I like to joke here, they didn't leave because I joined. It was just the timing turned out to be coincidental. But that allowed me to raise my hand and volunteer to take on these new responsibilities and get my role changed. So high level, that timeline that you're linking to there, it's going to show that I went through about 22 job interviews to get only 2 offers in the end. And that timeline took about a full year. And I think you could really sum it up with the Dunning-Kruger effect. If you look it up, it's a chart that kind of explains that you're really high confidence is when you're most ignorant. And then you reach this kind of valley of despair, which would have been about 6 months ago for me, where I thought, what is going wrong? I'm getting all these interviews. I've got certification now at that point in the timeline. What's wrong? Why am I not an admin yet? And I'm just glad I didn't give up there, because it kind of through the interview process, I figured out that what I wasn't communicating very well about what I understood about Salesforce administration. And then I went back to my employer and basically started practicing just those skills that I had not noticed before, and made sure to do some things there. When we can talk about more of that later, but in general, it took about a year, and it was really the changes in myself that I had to get over, that kind of arrogance.
Excellent, excellent. So you're a great example of perseverance. And I do see students get disenchanted whenever they get certified, or even before they're certified. Some start interviewing before certification, others wait till they have one or multiple certifications. There's no right or wrong answer, but just having that example of having gone on 22 interviews, that is not a typical effort by a lot of people. I see a lot of people give up or reach that valley of despair after 1 or 2 or 3 no's perhaps, or not even getting the interviews. So kudos to you for even landing those interviews. And then it sounded like there was a lot that you learned through that process. So do you remember some of the things that you really had to reflect on as far as shortcomings in yourself, where basically I need to improve in these areas? What were, and it could be Salesforce related, it could be communication. What were some of those areas that you needed to strengthen?
Yeah, so you know, a lot of people I've been telling this story to will focus kind of on the wrong part of the story. They'll see that I had an opportunity to log into a Salesforce instance with administrator rights and think, oh, Justin is lucky. He had something that all the employers he was interviewing with would have noticed right away. Well, arguably, I thought the same thing, but I was wrong. I was an accidental admin, or they call it like admin by walking around. Just because I had admin rights to change and create fields and make new objects doesn't mean that was the right thing for me to be doing in my role. And so I learned that I needed to be enrolling my manager and earning that kind of trust that allowed me to start saying confidently in those interviews that, you know, I'm the current Salesforce administrator of Twin Cities Public Television. And then I would rattle off my kind of about myself 2 minutes there. And in the beginning, I was timid about it because it wasn't my job title. But towards the end of that year, I was like fully embodying that. No, this is what I do. This is what I'm capable of doing, and I knew it confidently. And some of those things that represented those skills was, you know, I still remember the first time I reset a user's password. It seems so mundane, but like I said, for 4 years, that wasn't really expected of me, but I jumped on it the next time I overheard somebody say their password was locking them out, you know, and I'm like, oh, I can do that. And then another time was troubleshooting when a customer service agent who sits next to me was saying, I used to be able to see this field, and after this release last weekend, I couldn't see the field anymore. Something must have changed. And I remembered from some of your trainings in the course, you know, about access, and I think I even went back to one of your videos actually, looking through correctly the troubleshooting of, let me check the profile first. Let me check the field level securities. Let's see where this field had been turned off for the person. It might have been in the page layout, I think is where I ended up discovering it. And part of that is how you get to that. There's another part about what's actually controlling it, but you can kind of get at some of these things different ways, I've learned. But then one of the last ones that I think really broke open to moving from, yeah, I got an interview and we had a nice conversation for a half hour, to really kind of moving me up to them seeing me as an admin and capable, was when I built my first flow. I found a YouTube video. I didn't even come at it through the trailheads. I just really found this YouTube video by accident because I wanted to create a roll-up summary functionality without using a roll-up summary field. And it has to do with the fact that our org at Twin Cities Public Television didn't have any more roll-up summaries available to us. We just maxed out that object. We really liked roll-up summary fields. But I also didn't want to just deprecate one and make a new one. I decided, you know what, this is a chance to force me to learn flow. And I found a YouTube video that in 10 minutes, a Salesforce leader had shown those steps. They worked at Salesforce. And this person who'd made that one. It took me about 2 hours to get through that 10-minute video the first time. And then I ended up talking about that flow that I built for my company in every interview after that. So probably about 6 or 7 of those remaining interviews in the timeline, that I was really focusing in on that flow then. Because there's something really powerful about being able to, this is a key point. I brought a printout. I had screenshotted the flow diagram page and brought that to interviews then, and it really allowed me to show them and say, no, I've made this, I understand what I did in each of these sections, and the technical behind the scenes that makes this thing work and what it does. But another learning that came out of describing that diagram was understanding how little they wanted to know. Like, I was super proud of what I've learned, and I wanted to explain step by step. And I realized I had to bring it up to what I call like a 30,000 feet, you know, like a plane flying over. Stay high level, explain it at that level. Don't get down on the runway to explain what this diagram is doing. And that took some time and practice. I see this this mistake with some people in the community that I've had the opportunity to try to help with their job interviews and give them a chance to practice with somebody who's not the hiring manager, myself. And I've seen this mistake repeat then too, one that I was doing, and that is they'll describe their journeys and trailheads and the coursework they've done in great detail, what they've learned. And now sitting on the other side of the phone, and when they're practicing, I realize, oh, too much detail. Almost too much detail in this answer alone. You're kind of seeing how I did it again. If you go back and rewind 1.5 minutes, you'll see some of this story I didn't even need to share. But I think it also helps make the point.
Right, right. It's in interview process, and what you've succeeded in doing is getting actual experience so that you do have a story to tell. And then once you had a story to tell, you perfected that storytelling. You realize, okay, I'm giving too much detail. If I had it to do over again, I will shorten this piece and keep it at a higher level. And the nice thing about in this ecosystem is that there's so many jobs. There's you don't need to worry about burning bridges. And I think that's
Yep.
another thing that people fear, because in a traditional sense, word gets out quickly. Oh, this person doesn't know what they're doing or whatever. But if you bomb some interviews, that's not going to find its way. It may if you're interviewing at the same company, but it's not going to haunt you for the rest of your life. And so just really condensing down, and it's more not that how you do everything step by step, but just that you exhibit the ability to figure things out. And I just remember when I interviewed for my first Salesforce job that I got, I was going up against people that were much more experienced than myself. My eventual boss told me the reason that she hired me over those with more experience is because I exhibited a confidence that I would be able to figure out whatever she threw at me. Now, I didn't feel that confident, but I showed that on the external side. And you learned a lot in those 22 interviews. And so I think that now you mentioned that you're coaching others, and you've seen some of the mistakes that people are making. And so, can you tell me about when you came out of that valley of despair and you started gaining more confidence on the other side and realizing all that you didn't know, um, and then you ended up with 2 offers. Can you give me an idea as to your before and after, as far as what Salesforce has done for your career? And I'm not looking for specific numbers. I don't know what you're comfortable with sharing, but you can give percentages or whatever. But I would venture to guess that you're making more money now than you were. So just whatever you feel comfortable sharing in that regard, because I know it's a touchy subject.
Absolutely. And I'm not ashamed of it, but since, coworkers could find this video, I probably shouldn't say numbers. It's just professional. But what I can share, I'm so excited about, because it's life-changing for my family, and it's become a common refrain among the Salesforce community. But it speaks more to where my career was at before. So keep that in mind. My salary jumped 54%.
Okay.
Sounds really big, that's all. And some people, when I look at my paycheck, it feels like it's almost doubled. But what that really says is how stunted my career was before Salesforce. My salary was depressed because I had chosen to work at a nonprofit rather than for-profit, because I was late to go to college and get a 4-year degree. That also affected it. Another thing that was impacting my salary and keeping it low compared to some of my peers at my age was my wife's salary was doing really well. So that allowed me the freedom to take jobs that were more rewarding for mission. Twin Cities Public Television is a mission dear to my heart. Public media, Channel 2, Sesame Street, all those things, and and then also the next job I was taking, I was very selective. So I currently work at a company called Be the Match, you mentioned earlier. We save lives through cellular therapies. It's a bone marrow transplant organization nationwide. And even though I'd hoped to get offers earlier in that journey, those 22 job interviews, I wanted any one of those. There were definitely many of those that I was like, well, if they give me an offer, I won't be excited. One of them was titles, for real estate and researching titles. That was like one of the most boring ones. Like, ugh, I'm not going to get more sleep at night knowing that I've helped somebody research their title. Things like that, painting equipment and things that, it's just a job. But when you can have your work also serve a mission, I was hoping for that all along. and I was surprised that Be the Match actually came in competitive with the research of my area, the salary research for my area. So this has to do with how IT driven this organization is. And so here's a way to put this more for the people watching this video. Be really clear about what matters to you. So for me, I was listening in every job interview for what's the structure of the team? Will I be a solo administrator again, or will I have people to learn from? What's their commitment to Salesforce? Are they in the middle of a multi-million-dollar implementation, which means there's a serious commitment to the product? Or are they saying we've had Salesforce for 10 years and we're not even sure we're going to keep it forever? You know, we're frustrated, which can happen if they underfund it for a long time. So like, basically I ended up at the end getting very lucky that Be the Match was hitting all of those areas, not just some of them. Did that answer your question a little bit?
Yeah,
I
yeah.
feel like I could go off in some directions here, but it
All
gets
right.
into soul searching about
So,
what really matters to people, and it's different for everybody, you know.
all right. So 54% increase, and then as well, without mentioning specific numbers, but I thought you had an interesting take with your journey when I read it. Was you divided your increase by the number of interviews, and that was so you were able to monetize that. You looked at it as not a waste of time, but that actually gains you hundreds, if not thousands of dollars per interview experience, and also.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'm not, this is a number that is harder to back calculate, so I'm happy to share it. But you're right. I said my increase was X dollars, divide that by 22 job interviews to get that increase. And that meant every increase or every interview I went to, the ones I paid $25 for parking, the ones that I didn't get the job offer for, every single one of those was worth $1,250 to me.
Okay.
And that is huge, I think.
Right.
I
Right.
really wish people would look at those kind of equations, dividing it out like that, and say to themselves, this wasn't a waste of my time. And more importantly, I should have practiced with my mom. I should have practiced with my sister. I should have practiced with a stranger on a couple job interview questions. You could really ask a stranger in the Starbucks line if you got a long line. Hey, just ask me this question real quick. I'm gonna try answering it. It's gonna take less than a minute and a half. Honestly, that practice has a value. It would pay for your coffee.
Excellent. Another idea, and I've thought of this before. I've never personally done it. I don't know if it'd make me more nervous during an interview, and I don't know if it's legal or not, but an idea I've had is to record yourself while being interviewed, like an audio memo
Yeah,
to listen back to. So now, if someone goes and does that, don't sue me for giving you the idea. If it's because I guess in some states you're supposed to get their permission, but as long as you're not distributing and it's for your own personal review later. Because I know oftentimes coming out of an interview, either you feel like, okay, I've got this, or I don't have this, or I have no idea. But to be able to go back and see maybe to pinpoint where things start going downhill. And then another interesting thing is you mentioned how you could tell from the look on the person's face whether you were going to get the opportunity or not. And can you speak a little bit about that as far as identifying how to read the other person and some tricks maybe you learned on how to salvage some of that, or at that point maybe it's unsalvageable, but just reading the person on the other side of the desk.
okay, so this is a key one that we could get really wrong. So I just want to throw a little disclaimer out there. Reading facial expressions is ripe for error. You
Mhm.
don't know if they just got a alert on their Apple Watch, or they're thinking about picking up their kids in 2 hours because their whole day has been changed. You know, they're easy to misread. However, the only outcome you're trying to measure is whether or not you get the job offer in the next week, you kind of feel like, well, maybe I read it right anyway. Like, and so what I was noticing was excitement at the beginning of the interview would drain. And and it makes me sound so horrible, but it has to do with where their expectations were and how those expectations were registering in their micro expressions. And so it's when I think back to some of the faces I could see by the end of the hour-long interviews, I started to sense that what they saw in my resume didn't match what they had hoped I would talk about in the interviews. Let me use a good example because I'm now encountering it in my new job. There's a tool out there in the space called GearSet. It helps with deployments of Salesforce through lower environments like sandboxes up to higher environments for your production environment where your Salesforce people are interacting. And you can tell already I'm practicing these messages for my next interview. Those are things I didn't know about a year ago. And this tool GearSet was popping up in a lot of job interviews. And every time I'm going, I don't know what that is. Never heard of it. Is that a Salesforce product? No, it's not. It just connects into Salesforce. And now I could say I do, because I do use it, and I've used using it just this morning. But um, the point is, that was usually a turning point in the interview. Somebody would ask about that, and then I'd see that face change. Okay, Justin's never worked in a large enterprise with Salesforce that's using a tool like GearSet. He's, working in cowboy land at a nonprofit, doing it himself. He's testing in production is another joke, like you didn't test in a lower environment. So what's the takeaway for people watching this video? Please create a sandbox in your dev orgs. Can you do that, Mike? I think you could do that.
Not in a free developer account. It has
Darn
to
it,
be
not the
registered
free
for
one.
production. Yeah. So it's
One of
hard to get
one of the
trained.
students I know figured out how to connect two Salesforce orgs, like two Trailhead orgs, but that was taking advantage of a Salesforce feature. Anyway, I think the point is still the same. Just understand that you need to be aware that sandboxes are a functionality. You can watch YouTube videos on it, and also understand that change sets are the way you can do it with native functionality of Salesforce. What GearSet is doing for us as a product is it allows us to not need to rely on change sets. We can get all that information moved through a tool. I don't want to go into a lesson about GearSet because I'm still learning too, but back to the question about facial expressions, that was usually a turning point. And the key there was they were noticing that this person that they saw on a paper looked like he had a lot of valuable experience. And then I come into the interview and I'm talking, well, I don't know that. Well, I don't know that. What's GearSet? It took me a year to get messaging, get a story to tell that didn't come across like, well, I just don't know. Well, here's the type of integrations I have been doing. We just had a different tool called Redpoint at Twin Cities Public Television. So I talk about that, but keep it short. If I went too long about Redpoint, they just hear I have an experience in a tool they don't have. So like there was a double-edged sword kind of going on there. The other thing is, to describe that face, I don't want people to be discouraged during an interview. You still have to talk through it. So I also perform stand-up comedy. It's a passion of mine. I really enjoy it. And there's a phrase to like, some venues just really absorb laughter. The ceiling's 30 feet high. The lighting is weird. You just can't hear the audience laugh. And so there's an industry phrase to like, you still gotta, joke through it, and that's kind of what you got to do when you're seeing these facial expressions, is just keep pushing through it, because you still have to present yourself the best you can. You can't control how they're receiving it. It really has more to say about those interviewers and hiring managers not being clear in their job description. With their HR teams that phone screened me, they could have, there's multiple interviews out of those 22 where they could have done a better job to understand what they needed, and that I was never going to be a fit for that. So it's helped me, sleep at night to understand that those offers that never came, there's a lot of them I never deserved.
Right. Good answer. Good answer. So I like to equate this pursuit and this persistence that you exhibited with the 22 no's before the final yes as being like the velociraptors in Jurassic Park that are looking for the opening in the electrical fence, and they would get zapped and it would hurt and they get zapped, but they had a goal and they were relentless. And so in a lot of ways, you got to be like a raptor looking for an escape route in order to get to where you're wanting to go. So great job, and congratulations on your success. And just have a couple more questions for you. I know we're coming up against time here, but I'm curious, what is next for you? Do you have a certification you're pursuing, or where do you see yourself in a few years?
Yep, I'm looking at the platform app builder certification. I think I have the desire and interest to become a developer, Salesforce developer, but I'm not hedging my bets on that. You could talk to me in 2 years and I might just be still super excited to be an admin. And there's a really high likelihood that in about 5 years, I'll reach a stage of just being really comfortable. And I know a lot of things. Maybe I've been at the same company for a couple of years. I'm feeling really confident about the what they call tribal knowledge of the org. And I like that people rely on me for that kind of tribal knowledge that you don't get by jumping around too often. And um, on my 15-year roadmap, I'd love to become an architect, but I have to be honest with myself. I think reality is going to set in long before I reach that, and I'll just be like, you know what, I'm comfortable. I could do it, but I don't need it. So the way I would break that back down to like actual immediate goals is I'm telling myself that there is no excuse that I can't earn one single certification per year. I think that's a very attainable goal. It still allows for doing other things and learning just what needs to be learned to do your job well, wherever you're working. But in 15 years, 15 certifications, it's about an architect. But I, I don't know why I would ever fall behind one per year in that example. I will admit I'm already behind in the sense that I got my admin certification in September of 18, and now September of 19 has just passed. But I allowed myself to say, you know what, let's just be really grateful you started a new job. And, it was, I was within the first couple months of a new job. So really all my focus has been on that.
Gotcha. So, how did you discover myself, my courses, and what role has my content played in your journey?
So I was looking at Udemy, I think, as a potential platform to like add to my. I had a podcast for career advice. I was just took over as host about 2 years ago, and I thought maybe I could offer a course on Udemy. I never ended up building that course because, like a lot of us in our lives, kind of making my day job income work better started to make more sense than trying to make some sort of side thing work, right? And that's, I think, how I kind of stumbled upon yours. Because remember, I had the job at TPT, so I was in Salesforce, and I was starting to kind of become aware that there's more here. This isn't just a tool I use at work. This could be my whole career. And I was attending the user groups in Minnesota here, the nonprofit. We're lucky enough to have a nonprofit user group and a regular Salesforce administrator user group. That's a tip to anyone out there, though. If your community, if you look at the community page and say, oh, my community doesn't have a nonprofit user group, Justin's lucky. No, that's an opportunity for you. Go start the nonprofit user group then, and you be the leader of that one. Okay. Anyway, so I heard about you by one night. I definitely did do a search on Udemy. Hey, is there any Salesforce classes on here? And the rest is history.
Awesome, awesome. So, I think we're about out of time. So let me do a wrap up. And all right, so great stuff, Justin, and a great example of perseverance. And it all was worth it, I would say, based on your responses. And any final parting words of wisdom? Anything you want to plug? We're going to share the link to your story, of course. And your podcast, is that still going, or?
I still release a few episodes a year, but I'm not. I'm trying to get that up to like monthly, but not quite there yet. No, I do have one more tip for everyone though, because I see this question a lot in your Facebook group, and that is those practice tests. They're key. They're so helpful. That's how I passed the exam. Watched all of your videos on the admin exam, and then took those practice tests. Here's the thing, guys, and this seems so counterintuitive. Everyone goes into job interviews for Salesforce thinking they're going to be quizzed. Out of 22 interviews, I had one manager quiz my knowledge. One. And that blew my mind. I thought everyone was going to, this isn't school, people. This is jobs. And honestly, the less you say about Salesforce, the more they think you know about it. It's mind-boggling. I don't think you can trick anyone, don't get me wrong, and I wouldn't suggest that, but take your practice exams, pass the test, and then take the practice exams again, because you'll build that confidence that you know it if you can recite things. can you recite that there's 500 possible custom fields on the account object? I'm not even 100% certain I'm right about that one right now. But the point is the fact that that's one of the things I did memorize and can still remember a year later. It helps me feel like, yeah, I earned this. If you start forgetting those things, that's when you're going to go into a job interview feeling like you're not ready. And honestly, you should be, because you know where to find these answers. I've been 3 months at this new job at an enterprise level using things like your set. I can tell you every single one of us, developers included, are Googling our answers daily. There's a reason they didn't quiz me during the job interview. They know how we really do this work.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Justin, and appreciate your time, and good luck to you.
No, thank you. It was a pleasure to be here.
All right, thank you.